What's up guys, it's Frogfadoc, and at long last, this is the Samsung Galaxy tier list. Everything from the i900 all the way up to the Galaxy S25 Ultra. Do note that this is more specifically the Galaxy S tier list. This video won't feature the likes of the Galaxy Note series, the Galaxy FE series, and all the other weird and wacky stuff Samsung did. It's all just the mainline Galaxy S smartphones. If you are interested, however, I'm more than happy to make a Galaxy Note tier list, but that will be for another day. Instead, let's just go right into the Samsung Galaxy tier list, starting off with the OG. Now I know that there is a Samsung Galaxy phone that came out before this, but we're more specifically going with the Galaxy i9000, because that well and truly is the Galaxy S1, and we're just going to keep it simple for this list. The Galaxy S1 definitely wasn't fully formed at this time. It still had quite a ways to go. The design took heavy inspiration from the iPhone, actually quite a bit. That being said, it did have some key advantages from the iPhone, and that being the fact that this phone had an OLED display. Most phones at this time were still rocking LCDs, so the inky blacks of this OLED display looked quite nice. Now the OLED display was a pentile matrix, and it did have a little bit of a screen door effect caused by the rather low resolution and I guess the way the pixels are arranged on the OLED display. But other than that, it was still a pretty nice display and not too bad of a jumping off point for the Galaxy series. Like any good first generation product, even though this wasn't really a first generation product, it still needed some work. So for that, I think we're going to put the Galaxy S1 into the C tier, just up here. But this Galaxy S1 was absolutely improved on with following phones, such as the Samsung Galaxy S2. The Galaxy S2 was a much needed step up for the Galaxy series, and this is really where the series started to see some proper mainstream success. Pretty much everything got better in this generation. The design was improved, the cameras were improved, the processor was significantly improved, and in general it was just a lot more of a solid smartphone. We're going to be putting the Galaxy S2 into the B tier. The B stands for better than the S1. Next up, we have the Samsung Galaxy S3. I have fond memories of this smartphone when it released, and really, this is the Galaxy phone that really set the design language for Samsung's phones for the next several years. While the Galaxy S2 was very boxy and serious looking, the Galaxy S3 took for a more rounded nature look, which was reflected in the rounded pebble shape of the Galaxy S3 and the nature-inspired TouchWiz Android skin that was applied to it. And yes, this was the era of the bloops. Every time you touch the screen. This is kind of where Samsung got the representation of TouchWiz being a load of crap, but this was insanely iconic. You cannot deny that. And also, who could forget the marvelous tagline, designed for humans? Because who else is it going to be designed for, I guess? The Galaxy S3, I feel, might be an A tier contender? I don't know, we're going to put it in A tier for now. I'm going to see how I feel about this soon. But the Galaxy S3 really set in stone the design language for Samsung's phones for the next few years. I have a question. Do you know what comes after 3? That's right, 7. Anyways, this, my friends, is the Samsung Galaxy S4. The Galaxy S4 was actually a pretty nice step up for the Galaxy S series, but also a little bit of a weird one. This phone had a reputation for being massive. This was a 5-inch phone, and that was considered absolutely ginormous at the time. Fast forward to how phones look today, and yeah, this thing was absolutely ahead of its time in that regard. The resolution of the display was up to 1080p, and looks damn nice if I do say so myself. It also allowed you to film 1080p video on the cameras and play them back on the 1080p screen. And just in general, the S4 got a massive camera bump, making it rival a lot of point-and-shoot cameras at the time. This was indeed the era of every year having massive jumps in improvements and performance. And the S4 decided to put in some pretty weird features. For example, it had this head-tracking scrolling thing where you lift your head up and down to scroll your screen without touching it. It was a little bit weird. It also had another gesture where you could wave your hand in front of the phone to swipe through photos without actually touching the screen. Just weird stuff that never caught on and was removed in the next model. One thing it did add that I really liked though was the IR blaster. I really like when phones have IR blasters on them. Other than that, I believe the Samsung Galaxy S4 goes right up into the A tier. But is it better or worse than the Galaxy S3? That is the real question. I think it is better than the Galaxy S3. Even though the Galaxy S3 set in stone a lot of the design languages that would shape Samsung phones for the next few years, I feel the Galaxy S4 really introduced some meaningful changes. Also, hi, I moved the webcam down to this corner now because I realized that I'm going to be blocking the E and F tier soon. But that's okay, because we're not going to be needing the E or F tier soon. Why? Because next up is the Samsung Galaxy S5. The Samsung Galaxy S5 is well and truly one of the greatest smartphones ever made. The overall design of the phone definitely took a step up in this generation. It was still made out of plastic, but it felt a little bit better. It added some new features like a heart rate sensor on the back of the phone so you could measure your heart rate. I mean, what else would it do? Actually, it did blood oxygen as well. There you go, it did multiple things. It also added a fingerprint reader to the home button, which is nice, actually a really good feature, but in this generation you need to actually slide your thumb down the home button to scan it. Yeah, later generation Galaxies would fix this and make it just a tap, as it should be. This phone was also water resistant, while still having a removable back. You did need to have the back actually on the phone and pressed down properly, because there was actually a water seal gasket thing sort of on the back of it to prevent water from getting in. Another interesting thing about this phone is that instead of having a regular micro USB connector, it actually had a micro USB 3 connector. It was kind of interesting. The S5 also came with a flap to cover the port with, which barely survived. Most S5s today don't have that cover anymore because they broke off. Overall though, the Galaxy S5 is genuinely one of the best smartphones ever made. And for that, there's really no other spot that this thing can go in besides the S tier, right at the top. If you really think about what made the Samsung Galaxy line great, some really nice features, a vivid AMOLED display, removable batteries, this phone had it all, and it's the best one with all of them. How could Samsung possibly follow it up? Well, they did with the Samsung Galaxy S6. But not just the Galaxy S6, the S6 Edge and the Edge Plus. Starting off with the regular Galaxy S6, Samsung finally upped their design game on this phone and built a phone that wasn't made of plastic. Yeah, there was a little bit of an issue plaguing all the previous model Samsung phones. They were all just hunks of plastic and they kind of felt cheap. Samsung loved their fake metals, their fake leathers, but were all just made of plastic? No, Samsung built a real metal smartphone this generation, and not only that, the back was also made of glass. The Galaxy S6 had a metal frame with a glass back, which made the phone feel absolutely premium, and it's still what they do today. In terms of the design and build quality, Samsung absolutely nailed it this generation, and that's not even mentioning the S6 Edge. Samsung tried experimenting with curved edges on the Samsung Galaxy Note Edge, where they curved one side of the screen over the edge for whatever reason, because Samsung used to experiment back then, they certainly don't now. Even though the feature wasn't that useful, it still looked really cool, and Samsung brought it to the Galaxy S6 series and instead curved both edges of the phone. And it looked nice. It looked absolutely beautiful for the time. And this was really the first time Samsung fully overtook Apple in design by all means. Now of course, edge screens, I'm not really a fan of them. They're more prone to breaking, like, really easily. Just look at my Galaxy S8, I never break phones, and look what happened to this one. And it's more prone to accidental touches, and screen protectors don't really work with it properly. But for the time, it looked absolutely stunning, and these phones still look incredible to this very day. That would make it an easy S tier contender, right? Right? The Galaxy S6 unfortunately was a little bit of a polarizing phone. To start off with, the new design was great and premium, right? However, that glass back was glued down. Samsung removed the removable back. You could not peel off the back of your phone, swap out the batteries anymore. It was all fully sealed in. While this change has some downsides, like not being able to swap out your batteries really easily, especially when it starts dying, at least you get some nice benefits like some better water resistance. Samsung removed the water resistance from the Galaxy S6. The whole reason for sealing the back of the damn phone is to make it more water resistant. And they removed the water resistance from the S6. They also removed the SD card slot. That's right, in 2015, Samsung removed the SD card slot from their flagship phone. Yeah, They also removed the USB 3 port and went back to a USB 2 port. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but again, they're removing quite a few things. They did add a few nice things though, such as wireless charging, a 1440p screen, which is still pretty much the standard for flagship smartphones today, and in my opinion is still very much overkill for phones. You cannot see the pixels at all. 4K screens are unnecessary. In general, the Galaxy S6 was a very polarizing phone. It made a lot of much needed improvements to the Galaxy line, especially in build quality, but it took so much away of what made Samsung phones so great. Before I put this in its tier, let me tell you a little bit of how I'm ranking these phones. I'm not necessarily ranking these phones of overall how good of a smartphone they are. Well, of course that factors into it, but I'm also ranking them of how good of a Samsung Galaxy it was. For example, how exciting it was, what features did it add or remove. So while the Galaxy S6 was a pretty damn good smartphone all around, it really made a lot of just wrong choices, and for that, I'm gonna have to put it right into the D tier, unfortunately. Again, the Galaxy S6 line of phones are an incredible line of phones. They are good phones. Samsung just really took a misstep on this generation. A misstep that they would fix on next year's model, the Samsung Galaxy S7 and S7 Edge. The Galaxy S7, to put it simply, is what the S6 should have been. They brought back the SD card slot. They re-added water resistance to the phone. They also increased the battery size because the Galaxy S6 actually decreased the battery size from the Galaxy S5. The Galaxy S7 went all the way up to 3000 mAh, and the larger S7 Edge went up to 3600 mAh. Significant battery improvements on the Galaxy S7. And also a little bit of foreshadowing as to what came next. The Galaxy S7 was just all around a solid phone. It was just pure solid. And this again is also one of the greatest smartphones ever made. And for that, I'm gonna have to put it in none other than the S tier next to the Galaxy S5. It's just an insanely solid smartphone. And it really is the best of the home button generation of the Galaxy phones. Do you remember when I hinted at a little bit of foreshadowing for the Galaxy S7 batteries? Well, after the Samsung Galaxy S7 came out, Samsung released the Galaxy Note 7, and it was an absolute banger of a smartphone. Why don't you check out the video that I made about it? Click up here in the top corner. Unfortunately, Samsung crammed too large of a battery into this phone. Quite literally, it had no room to expand at all, which caused it to get punctured and it blew up. And then the models that were sent out after the recall got recalled too, once they also blew up. The reason why I bring this up is because this would affect Samsung's phones for the next 2 years, and this incident looms over the next smartphone in this tier list, the Samsung Galaxy S8. The Samsung Galaxy S8 was a complete redesign for the Samsung Galaxy S series. Completely removing the home button and the navigation controls on the bottom of the screen, replacing it with just one big screen. This was the era of bezel-less smartphones, when smartphone makers would try to push as high of a screen to body ratio as they possibly could. I so happen to have a Galaxy S8 right here. This was my Galaxy S8 that I used as my main phone when I was younger. Right off the bat, this phone looked incredible. It is one of the best looking smartphones of all time. It doesn't have any notches or hole punches that get in your way. It's just a symmetrical forehead and chin, which I don't mind. I don't really mind if there's a forehead and chin, as long as it's symmetrical. It looks good. And of course, with such a fundamental change as this, there were quite a few issues that they had to solve. For example, what do you do with the home button? Well, of course, they just went to what every other Android maker was doing at the time and just putting software buttons on the display. Samsung actually built a force touch sort of area on the bottom of the phone, which meant that you could actually press the screen on your phone and it would act as a home button. I really like this, and I genuinely think smartphone makers should bring this back. It's still one of the quickest ways to just go home instead of, having to swipe up like you need to do now. Even when you're in a full screen app, you don't have to swipe up then swipe up again, you just press the home button and you're home. But where do you put the fingerprint scanner? Well, the fingerprint scanner moved to the back next to the camera. Yep, it was on the back of the phone. right here, which meant that while you're holding the phone, you sort of had to raise your finger like that. People did complain about this, of course, but if you had a case on, it was actually really easy to feel where the fingerprint scanner is and just, you know, tap it and get right into your phone. If you didn't have a case, it wasn't completely impossible. It was definitely a little bit harder, but because the fingerprint scanner and the camera felt so similar and were at such similar heights, you very often could accidentally smudge your camera, which led to, you know, blurry photos and stuff. It wasn't that big of a deal, but it was a little bit of a gripe that some S8 owners had with their phones. Another gripe that Galaxy S8 owners had with their phones, it was a little thing on the side of their phones we like to call the Bixby button. That's right, next to your volume buttons you had an extra button right here, specifically for Bixby, Samsung's new virtual assistant. And it was really annoying because Samsung wouldn't let you remap the button. However, there were ways to get around this, and what it meant is that you got a bonus button on your phone that you could remap to anything. I remapped my Bixby button to be media controls. Press it to play and pause, double press to skip tracks. It was amazing. I'm pretty sure I also set long press to turn on the flashlight, which is extremely handy because you can just pick up your phone and boom, now you can see things. I also made it so that when I'm on my lock screen, if I press and held the button, it would just go into do not disturb mode, which is also super handy. I absolutely love phones with extra remappable buttons on them because you can do just so much with them. And I kind of wish smartphone makers would actually start adding extra buttons to their phones again. It's nice, it's really handy and very, very useful. There's a few more things as well that were added with the Galaxy S8. For example, it now has a USB-C port. Yes, very good. This phone was also one of the first to popularize the taller aspect ratio which we see on phones nowadays. They also added Samsung DeX so you could use your phone like a desktop. It's nice, but also it's not that useful. And it also added an iris scanner. I am not really that much of a fan of the iris scanner. It always just felt wrong and like it was damaging your eyes. I don't know. Yeah, unfortunately for the Galaxy S8, the battery wasn't that fantastic. They stayed at a 3000 mAh battery for the Galaxy S8. Why? Because the Note 7. They didn't want this one to blow up either. A lot was riding on the S8 for it to not blow up and kind of restore Samsung's image. Either way, the Samsung Galaxy S8 was an absolutely incredible smartphone. Does it go into the S tier or the A tier? It has a few things holding it back and a few things that were improved upon in future models. I feel like the Galaxy S8 belongs at the bottom of the S tier for now, because there were definitely things that were improved upon in the Samsung Galaxy S9. To put it simply, the Samsung Galaxy S9 is a better S8. And the S8 was already insanely good. One of the first things you'll notice about the Galaxy S9 is that they moved the position of the fingerprint scanner from the side of the camera to the bottom of the camera, which actually does help the reachability issue of the previous model. This is a feature everyone keeps glossing over, but the Galaxy S9 added dual speakers to the phone. While the Galaxy S8 only had a speaker on the bottom, it was okay. It was a mono speaker, it wasn't that good. The Galaxy S9 used the earpiece as a secondary speaker like modern phones do, and it sounds significantly better. Another really cool and short-lived feature of the Galaxy S9 was the variable aperture lens, which meant that the Galaxy S9 could actually open and close its aperture to let more light in for darker shots, and it worked pretty damn well. This was actually such a really nice and handy feature that I'm shocked got removed and smartphone makers haven't revisited. Why haven't they revisited this? That's actually a really nice feature. The Galaxy S9 Plus was also the first mainline Galaxy S series to add a second camera to their phones. Galaxy Note 8 did it first, but the Galaxy S9, well, followed. This smartphone is so damn close to perfection. The one thing holding the S9 back is the fact that the batteries still weren't that fantastic. They still were limiting their batteries from the Galaxy Note 7 era, which is unfortunate, but other than that, the Galaxy S9 is a near perfect smartphone. And can I just mention too, the S9 had some absolutely beautiful colors that it came in. Just very, very nice looking colors. Gee, I wonder, what tier should I put the S9 in? I don't think there's any other tier that this phone belongs into besides the S tier. But does it go above or below the Galaxy S5? It's a hard call because the S9 is a near perfect phone, but the S5 had a removable back. It was more Samsung. I think I'm gonna put it above the Galaxy S5, and that's mostly because the S5 is still a hunk of plastic. But yeah, Galaxy S9 is probably one of the greatest Samsung phones ever made, one of the greatest Android phones ever made, one of the greatest smartphones ever made. It's a damn good phone. Next up is the Samsung Galaxy S10 and S10 Plus. Samsung was just on an absolute roll. They were just producing banger after banger after banger, and the Galaxy S10 is another banger. The most noticeable difference is that they shrunk down the bezel from the Galaxy S9 to Galaxy S10, opting for a hole punch camera in the top corner, which some people still prefer to this very day. How could we not forget the countless amounts of wallpapers people made to try and hide the camera? I thought this was cool. The Galaxy S10 also standardized the camera layouts we really see today with the ultra-wide main and telephoto setup that we see on almost every single smartphone nowadays. They did remove a few things though from the Galaxy S10, such as the iris scanner. Some people really like the iris scanner, but I'm not a fan of the iris scanner. They also removed the notification LED. Okay, I guess. I mean, you have an always on display nowadays, they're kind of obsolete. The Galaxy S10 finally increased the battery size. It took Samsung 3 years to finally move on from the Note 7, so the base S10 went up to a 3,400 mAh battery, and the Galaxy S10 Plus went up to a 4,000 mAh battery. Much better batteries in these phones. They also removed the fingerprint scanner on the back and actually put it under the screen, and they went for an ultrasonic fingerprint scanner, which is a good move because my Pixel 8 Pro still uses an optical one. Thanks Google, at least you fixed it on the 9 series. But yeah, ultrasonic is just plain better in most circumstances. It still had the Bixby button. One thing that's interesting about the buttons though is that the power button was really high on the S10 series, almost too high for a lot of people. I don't know why, but Samsung decided to put the power button all the way up here on the S10 series, which is, I don't know, it was a little bit strange. That being said, the S10 is just another banger. It really does need to go next to the S9 because they're pretty similar in just how great these phones are. But what if I were to tell you that's not the only phone Samsung released for the S10 era? No, there's another one here. The Galaxy S10e. The Galaxy S10e was the first time since the Galaxy S5 that they made a mini version of a Galaxy S phone. It was also the last time they did it. But the S10e was a pretty solid smartphone. It had 2 cameras on the back instead of 3. It actually had a fingerprint scanner on the side of the phone, which was faster and more reliable than the underscreen one. And it actually still lets you do the gestures on the phone, which you could do on the S8, where for example, we could actually map your fingerprint sensor to bring down your notification slider using this. You could do that on the S10e just by using the power button. Very nice. This phone also had a flat display for the first time since the regular Galaxy S7, because we're kind of getting to a point where curved displays are really getting a bit, do we really want them? I really like the Galaxy S10e because I can respect mini smartphones. I like mini smartphones, and it's such a shame that they don't make these things anymore. Of course the battery wasn't as good, of course the cameras weren't as good. That doesn't matter, it's a mini flagship Samsung phone. Of course, it does make some concessions to get to where it is, so I can't really put it in S tier, but there is a nice warm spot for it sitting in the A tier, and I'm actually going to put it above the S4 and S3 because it's still got a premium build quality to it. Glass and metal, unlike the S3 and S4, which are just hunks of plastic, although they have removable backs. Next up, we have a little bit of a forgotten phone in Samsung's lineup, which is the Galaxy S10 5G. This phone wasn't just a 5G phone, and specifically being one of the first 5G phones to market. This phone was kind of like a Galaxy S10 Ultra, but before the Ultra line was created. This phone was massive. It was a 6.9-inch phone. It also had an insanely large 4,500 mAh battery to it, which you needed because 5G modems at this time sucked up a lot of power. 5G was pretty bad in 2019. But yeah, really, this phone was just created to jump on the 5G bandwagon. It had a few extra things, like there being some extra cameras and sensors and stuff on the back, and even on the front, the pill on the front was pretty long, which looked weird. It's a decent phone and all, but it's a little bit of an oddball. I think we're going to put this one up in the A tier next to the Galaxy S3. I don't think it's really like a B or a C tier, because even though it was made just to cash in on 5G, it added some useful stuff like a bigger screen, bigger battery, some camera improvements. Sure, why not? Let's stop here for a moment now that we've reached the Samsung Galaxy S10, and let's just have a look at this tier list above us for a moment. What you'll notice is that Samsung released a lot of incredible just S tier and A tier smartphones for years and years in a row. The real question is, going into the 2020s, can Samsung keep up this momentum of just producing so many banger smartphones? Well, let's find out with the Samsung Galaxy S11. No, wait, sorry, I meant the Samsung Galaxy S20. What? So Samsung skipped from the Galaxy S10 all the way up to the S20, which always confused me a bit. Samsung did this to actually align the S number to the year the phone was released in. So the S20 was released in 2020, S21 in 2021, etc. Either way, the Samsung Galaxy S20, and this unfortunately is where I believe that Samsung's golden era really ends. Because man, this is the most bland and boring smartphone I've ever seen. There is no excitement to this thing. In terms of design, they moved the camera bump from the middle all the way up into the corner in this just boring budget phone looking design. It was quite literally what they were doing on their budget phones. It does make sense as to why they were doing this. For one, it does help with the internals of the phone having the cameras up here, which leaves more room for motherboards and stuff. I did have some people comment on my Samsung design video that Samsung had to do this to get better image quality, but honestly, all I'm going to say to that is Google Pixel. Google Pixel. No excuses. These phones produce absolutely amazing photos, such as the video you're watching right now. Yes, my webcam's a Pixel 8 Pro, and they do it with their cameras in the middle of the phone, so yeah, no excuses there, Samsung. My theory is that it has to do with a little bit of the engineering side, and more to do with the let's copy Apple side, and you'll see what I mean by that in the upcoming models. But why is this phone so bad, I hear you cry? Because just like the S6, they did a lot of very un-Samsung-like moves. They removed the heart rate sensor from the phone, so you can no longer measure your heart rate, and the only way to do that is with a Galaxy Watch now. They removed the Bixby button, which a lot of people praise, but kinda sucks because I like having extra buttons on my phone that I can remap. But worst of all, after mocking Apple relentlessly for doing it, Samsung went and removed the headphone jack. It wouldn't have been so bad if Samsung, again, didn't make fun of Apple for it and then just do it themselves. How embarrassing. How absolutely embarrassing of you, Samsung. And even then, there's people who say, who cares, it's a headphone jack, just get wireless earbuds. But no, I like the option and the reliability of a cable. One good thing they did with the Galaxy S20 series is that they gave them all high refresh rate screens, so that's good. I kind of wish that the S8, S9, S10 all had high refresh rate screens, but yeah, S20 finally introducing some high refresh rate screens. Good job Samsung, but not good job Samsung because these phones started at $1,000 US. They were so damn expensive. Yeah, Galaxy S20 series really was a little bit of a misstep for the Galaxy S line. And for that, I believe the Galaxy S20 series belongs next to the Galaxy S6 series in the D tier. What a disappointing phone this was, and the start of Samsung's soulless era of just nah. That's not the only phone Samsung released for the S20 era. They also released the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra, their first ever Ultra phone, if you don't count the S10 5G, of course. The big selling point of this phone was its massive 100x zoom, which was cool because this was a classic era Samsung trying new things for the sake of it kind of thing. However, there are many things that I don't like about it on this phone. Number one, man, the design of this phone just sucks. Also, the 100x zoom text that they put on the back of the phone looks extraordinarily tacky. This is giving me Galaxy S2 vibes. This is giving me 2000s feature phone vibes. It's just tacky and disgusting. I don't like it. And the best part is that the 100x zoom looked like complete and utter crap. Like, if you zoomed in 100x, it's just a blurry mess, so it wasn't that good anyways. Then again, having the periscope lens really does help with zoom into like the 5x, 10x range, which is handy and nice. On modern smartphones, it's really good, but this is a first generation thing and it wasn't that good. Also, the Galaxy S20 Ultra straight up just had focusing issues with its camera, so you spent all this money to get a phone with an amazing camera just for it to not even focus properly on your photos. I'm quite tempted to actually put this under the Galaxy S20. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put this underneath because the main selling point of this phone was the 100x zoom. The 100x zoom kind of sucked. Also, the cameras sucked because they didn't focus properly. So yeah, a bit of a failure. And also in general, I just really don't like the S20 era of Samsung. It's just, yeah, it's when everything started going down here in my opinion. Can Samsung recover from this L? Let's find out on the next phone, which is the Samsung Galaxy S21. Right off the bat, the S21 looks a lot less boring design-wise than the Galaxy S20. And I would go as far to say that this is the best looking Samsung that they've released since the S10. Or actually since the S9. I think the S9 looks better than the S10. The S21 is probably the best looking modern era Samsung phone. Especially this purple and gold colorway here. Some people hate it. I absolutely dig it. I like how it looks. The S21 is where Samsung started to actually flatten out their displays and get rid of the curved screens. So the S21, the S21 Plus actually had flat screens. And they actually fixed the pricing issues on the S21 as well and made it cheaper. It was $799 in the US, going down from $999 in the US. I forget how much they were in Aussie bucks. Also, the base S21 actually had plastic on the back of the phone, which I don't mind. Plastic is more durable and more repairable than glass is, so I actually don't mind this change, to be honest. Sure, it's less premium, but you're just going to put a case on it anyway. And the way they did the plastic, it was decent enough and it still looked like frosted glass, so... And the base S21 as well had a 1080p screen as opposed to a 1440p screen, which is also, who cares, because 1080p is still plenty on a smartphone. My Pixel 8 Pro, I'm still running at 1080p. I've never set it to 1440p in my life. It just takes up more battery and just, yeah. So the 1080p screen helps with battery, the plastic back helps with repairability, durability, makes it less fragile overall. I think it's actually pretty good concessions to make it cheaper. Some downsides though, Samsung followed Apple in removing the charger from the box because of course they did. And once again, they removed the SD card slot from the phone, just like the Galaxy S6 did, but this time it was permanent and they would not bring it back. That alone's pretty stinky. It's definitely better than the S20 series. Definitely seems like a C tier phone. Now, I would have put this phone in B tier if it didn't remove the SD card slot, but that alone is pretty shitty of you, Samsung. Get in the C tier where you belong, S21. So yeah, Galaxy S21. Speaking of Galaxy S21, Galaxy S21 Ultra. Galaxy S21 Ultra was actually a much more improved Galaxy S20 Ultra. First of all, the design. I like how the design looks. It's a good design. See this little red dot here? That's actually a laser focusing that kind of helped fix the focus issues of the Galaxy S20 Ultra. Just in general, it's a better Galaxy S20 Ultra. Also, the back glass is a matte finish now, and it looks good. Cool, the S21 Ultra. Much improved, but it's kind of back to where it should have been in the first place. I think it's definitely better than the normal S21, but I think I'm going to put it at the top of the C tier though. And I have a reason for this, okay? I have a plan. I have a plan in my mind, okay? There's going to be more Samsung phones going in here. There's definitely some phones better than the S21 Ultra in my opinion, because really the S20 Ultra and the S21 Ultra were just slightly better than the lower models, so they're not really feeling extremely ultra to me. Next up, we have the Samsung Galaxy S22. Yes, the Samsung Galaxy S22. It's an S21, but slightly different. The S22 has got more symmetrical bezels, which is nice. The sides of the phone are slightly less rounded and a little bit more more flat to mimic Apple. And actually an interesting thing they did is they actually reduced the size of these phones. The S22 and S22 Plus are actually slightly smaller than the S21 and S21 Plus. Other than that, they're pretty damn similar phones. And for that, the only spot I can really put it is, well, right next to the S21. Because honestly, what is an S22 but just a better S21? We're really starting to get into the era of diminishing returns on smartphones, so the jumps are going to be a lot less bigger on these phones. Next up, we have the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra. The Galaxy Note series is a bigger, better Galaxy S phone with an S Pen, so you can draw on the screen and stuff. With the S20 Ultra and the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra coming out, they were sort of occupying the same space in the lineup and kind of fighting for the Ultra Samsung spot. And year after year, the Galaxy Note was becoming a little bit more irrelevant, which meant in 2021, Samsung actually got rid of the Galaxy Note series, which was a little bit of a shame because people like the S Pen. But Samsung actually did something really nice, and they brought it back and merged it with the Ultra series, making the S22 Ultra essentially a redesigned and modernized Note 20 Ultra. Because even though the cameras look different, the overall shape and body of the phone and the S Pen are all the same from the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra. And once again, I think this was actually a pretty genius move from Samsung. It helps make the Ultra phone more Ultra, and the S Pen is actually a really novel feature. And also the squared off corners of the S22 Ultra really help make it feel more like an Ultra phone, if you know what I'm saying. And I feel like it might actually be an A-tier contender for reviving the Note series and keeping some of Samsung's charm intact, because the S Pen and the rectangular design are original ideas from Samsung, and it's so good that they decided to keep it around. Next up, we now enter the next era of Samsung, which I like to call the traffic light era. Starting off with the Galaxy S23. Ah yes, the traffic light layout, which was the next logical evolution for Samsung's phone design. Because really, what is the S23 Ultra? It's an S22 Ultra, but without that extra little camera bit that connects to the side. And to be fair, I do get it. I understand why Samsung did this, and I can actually kind of respect the design a little bit. What falls apart for me, however, is one, how boring this is after 3 years of having this design now, but two, how the flagship Samsung phones now look exactly the same as the budget Samsung phone. Actually, no. Every single Samsung phone looks exactly the damn same now. I don't know, it's just kinda lazy in my opinion. At least the budget phones back in the day used to try something different, but we're really getting into the era of Samsung just not trying anymore. The sides of the phones are still slightly round, but a little bit more squared off to be like an iPhone. I do know the batteries had an improvement on the S23. Other than that, there's not really much to talk about with the S23 and S23 Plus. I definitely think the S23 is better than the S22, mostly because of the battery improvements, which you'll actually notice in your day-to-day usage. Man, who cares? Also, while we're here, I might move the S21 Ultra up to the B tier, because I think we need to fill out that tier a little bit more. Yeah, I feel like that kind of makes a little bit of sense. Is the S23 worse than the S1? Probably not, but I mean, it is the one that started everything. I don't know. Here's where the tier list kind of falls apart a little bit, doesn't it? Next up, we have the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. It's got slightly better cameras, it's got a slightly better battery, and the front screen is slightly less curved. That's really about it, honestly. S23 Ultra is a better phone than the S22 Ultra, but look, it's a lot more boring than it was, so part of me feels tempted to put it in the B tier, but that would also kind of be a little bit disrespectful, I think, so we're going to put it into the A tier. Maybe we'll just put it above the S22 Ultra. The S22 Ultra was definitely a lot more exciting because Samsung, you know, they merged the Note line with the S series, but the S23 Ultra is still a better phone in my opinion. I don't know. Next up, we have the Samsung Galaxy S24. One notable thing about this phone is that Samsung fully flattened the sides of the phone in the exact same way Apple did. The same flat edges with the same slight curvature that they did on the 15 compared to the 14. Talking about iPhones here. This is the year where Samsung finally went, screw it, we don't care anymore, we're just Apple copycats and we're just going to be shameless about it. Mind you, the S24 came out in the same year as the Galaxy Buds 3 and the Galaxy Watch Ultra. Just 2024 was a horrible year for Samsung design, as I talked about in the video that I made about them. The bezels are quite a bit thinner on the S24 compared to the S23. If you're someone who gives a shit, the cameras are quite literally the exact same between the S23 and S24. Maybe there's a little bit of improvement, but I'm not going to be able to see the difference. And this is also the year they introduced Galaxy AI. I feel like I should go with F tier just for Galaxy AI, but I'm going to hold back on that. I know the S24 is a really decent smartphone. If you need a really nice smartphone that just works and is good, then just get an S24. The S24 in general was like an A tier smartphone. But that's not what this list is about. This list isn't about overall phone quality. It's about nitpicking Samsung. What the S24 is just boring. It's a boring smartphone, and it's also a soulless copy of an iPhone. Down to the way it looks and even the size of the phone, like come on guys. And for that, I feel the S24 can actually go in the D tier below the S20, simply because of just how shameless Samsung is nowadays and just how absolutely lazy their designs are. Honestly, it's not like they even did anything interesting with the phone too. At least the S20 added a high refresh rate screen. It may seem like I've just been absolutely shitting on Samsung's modern phones for the last however many minutes, but I'm actually going to turn things around a little bit with the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Because honestly, there's things I like about the S24 Ultra. The S24 Ultra felt like the one Samsung phone, besides actually no, the foldables were pretty boring that year too. It felt like the one Samsung phone of 2024 that kind of carried a little bit of the old Samsung spirit to it. Now the whole industry is going for flat sides and curved corners on their phones. Samsung decided to do something a little bit different and actually fully square off the S24 Ultra, like legitimately sharp corners on their phone. The screen is a square screen with no rounded corners, just like how older smartphones used to be. And I can kind of applaud Samsung for trying something slightly different. It's something slightly different, but they dared to make an actual design quirk in 2024. Of course, Samsung also jumped on the titanium bandwagon with Apple, but the titanium is still nice on their phone though. And I don't know, in general it felt like everyone really liked the S24 Ultra. Also, the S24 is the year Samsung finally killed the last remnants of the curved edges on their screens. The S24 Ultra is completely flat, the corners of the phone aren't even curved, so this is quite literally a box. This is the boxiest, sharpest phone I've ever seen. It really shows like how far Samsung design has fallen though, when the exciting part of their design is the fact that they didn't round the corners. Also, running One UI 7, man, it does not match at all and it actually looks kind of terrible. So, I mean, there is that, I guess. I think the S24 Ultra is actually a really decent phone and nearly convinced me to try Samsung again, although I'm not going to go back to Samsung. I like my Google Pixel. I've always been a fan of the Galaxy Note line, and love it or hate it, this is a Galaxy Note. I think I'm actually going to put the Galaxy S24 Ultra in the very bottom of the S tier. Congrats, we have one modern era Samsung that made it here. Next up, we have the Samsung Galaxy S25. Do you guys want to know something interesting about the Galaxy S25? So the Galaxy S25, I'm looking at my notes and the only thing I've written here is Honestly, that sounds about right because the Galaxy S25 added a whole heap of nothing. There is nothing to talk about with the S25, and I genuinely mean it. There's nothing to talk about here. Actually, there's one thing I can talk about, but I'm going to save it for the S25 Ultra because it also applies to the S25 Ultra, and it's funny. But yeah, the Galaxy S25, I'm going to put this thing in the D tier because it's just the most boring, it's just camera rings. And last but not least, the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. I have some thoughts about the Galaxy S25 Ultra. Let's start off with the corners. They went and rounded the corners. Yeah, I knew Samsung wasn't going to stick with the ergonomically terrible squared corners of the S24 Ultra, but man, does it not just make this phone look absolutely generic, boring, the same as everything else on the market? You quite literally lost your edge, man. Where's your edge? Okay, well at least it's still got the S Pen, so that makes it a good Galaxy Note, right? In the Samsung Galaxy Note 9, Samsung added some pretty nifty features to the S Pen. Samsung essentially took the S Pen of the Galaxy Note 9 and made it a Bluetooth compatible device, which meant that you could prop your phone up on a table and then press the S Pen to take a photo with it. And then you could also use it to like advance slides and presentations and stuff. There was many cool things you could do with it, and it just shows that Samsung really tried to cram as much as they possibly could in the S Pen. This was during their, golden era, the S9 era, when they would actually try stuff like this. Samsung kept these features around for every Note and S Ultra phone that came after it, but with the S25 Ultra series, they removed it. They made the S Pen a basic S Pen just like how it was from the Galaxy Note 1 to the Galaxy Note 8. And Samsung gave what I like to call the YouTube explanation for removing the feature. Why? Because apparently 1% of users used it. You know what 1% of like several million people are? That's like 100,000 people that used your feature. So yeah, that's what we love, isn't it? A nice boring update to a smartphone, and we're also removing features on top of that. Bravo, Samsung. But the one difference between the S24 Ultra and the S25 Ultra is some extra rings around the camera lenses. I do like the look of them, although there is something to be said about pretending that your cameras to be larger than what they are. But the best part about the camera rings on the Galaxy S25 and the S25 Ultra is that you can pop them off. You can pop them off of the phone and then your phone looks like an S24. And really, that's all the S25 and S25 Ultra are. The previous year's model with some camera rings just slapped onto them, because under the cover, they're all just an S24 all along. It's actually an S24 with removed features. How nice is that? And for that, the S25 Ultra is an absolute just failure in my opinion. I do not like this phone. Let's have a think. Do we put it with the S6, which removed a bunch of features? I can't really put it with the S20 Ultra because at least the features on the S25 work, but the camera lenses slightly fall off. Actually, you know what? Just out of personal spite, I'm going to put the S25 Ultra into the E tier. I think it's so stupid what they've done with this phone. Again, S25 Ultra is a great smartphone, but are we seriously still removing features now on these modern smartphones? Especially some of the most unique features and unique design traits Samsung had left, they're all just disappearing from the Galaxy series. It's just kind of getting worse. Also, One UI 7 looks like certified trash, and these phones launch with it, so yeah. If we're gonna judge TouchWiz on the Galaxy S3, I'm gonna judge One UI 7 on the Galaxy S25 Ultra. Just saying. And there we have it. That, my friends, is the Samsung Galaxy tier list. I've been talking for 2 hours now, and modern Samsung is kind of certified trash, and I miss the Galaxy S5 to S9 era. The only thing I really have left to say at this point is Smaznug.